And notice that, well, there's some messed up things with that family, and we're going to take a little bit more look at that today. But one of the things about observing other messed up families is that on some level we can make some identity of our own. Russell Moore, in his book, The Storm-Tossed Family, he reflects upon holidays. And he says that his favorite holiday is Halloween. He's like, I'm a Baptist kid, and I should be like, oh, that's the furthest thing up from my mind. I don't want anything to do with that. But when it came down, the candy was great. But with this, the message that was in the culture of there's bad things out there on this day. You got to watch out. One of his favorite things was to be at home, knowing that he was safe, that the Lord was protecting him, even from these things which sometimes the culture celebrates. That God was with him. But then he says there was another thing that I really made Halloween my favorite holiday season, and that was that there was no family fights. Christmas, Easter, there was all these things that happened and all these expectations. This is what he writes. No one sat down at a card table for a meal, someone frantically stressed about getting just right. No one would compare this Halloween to the Halloweens of years past. No one would get his or her feelings hurt or upend Halloween with a fiery dinner table discussion about how Uncle Ronnie drinks too much. No one had to pretend that this was the most wonderful time of year. No one slammed a door and cried out through tears, "You've ruined our Halloween!" However scary Headless Horsemen and Swamp Things could be, sometimes a Christmas dinner or an Easter egg hunt or a wedding reception or a child's birthday party can be even more terrifying than a haunted wood. Family, though it is supposed to be a refuge from all that, it is supposed to be warm and tranquil and sentimental. That's certainly the image most of us project on our Christmas cards. To be sure, these presentations are usually true as far as they go. Most people don't make up that little Connor won the science fair this year or that Emma made partner in her law firm. Most people don't announce that the rumors of the restraining order against Aunt Flossie are fake news. But much goes unseen and unsaid for obvious reasons. When we think and consider family and all that's connected with it, sometimes it's not so good. Well, as we look in the Bible, and sometimes we're looking for inspiration and models, and we come to the middle chapters of Genesis, and we find nothing close to that. We are in Genesis starting in chapter 28 today, and as 27 has led into 28. When we last left our characters, Esau and Jacob, who are twin brothers. One was born, a couple minutes before the other, but the younger one has purchased the birthright from the other one for a bowl of stew because Esau was so hungry. What do I care? I'm going to die if I don't have food. And so he sells his birthrights, the extra share he would have had. In their culture, they would have had, if they had two children, they would have split the inheritance 3 ways. The older would have gotten twice as much. If they had 12, they would split it up in 13 ways. So Esau sells his extra share to his brother because he's hungry. But then later on, when it comes to a blessing, in conjunction with his mom, Jacob disguises himself before his dad and his brother, brings him food, covers himself with some hairy garments to make it look like he's his brother, and receives the blessing that was intended for Esau on himself. The result of that is that Esau now is very angry with his brother. In fact, is consoling himself with the thought that once dad dies, forget about it. I'm going to take him out. Well, this is not a good family situation by any means. And as it's coming through and happening, Rebecca, the mother who loves Jacob more than Esau, not to say that she doesn't love Esau at all, but she preferred her son Jacob, and Isaac, the father, preferred the son Esau because he was a man of the woods and the wild. There was tension within that family, but with Isaac's very soon demise and death, Esau held a grudge against Jacob and consoled himself. So Rebecca jumps into action. and she tells Jacob, all right, you got to get out of here. Go up to Paddan Aram, my hometown, way up to the north and to the east, and go find my brother's family, Laban. He will care for you, and you'll be able to come back here when it's possible. But Esau is consoling himself with all this by the fact that he's going to kill you, and then he'll have everything. But then when she goes to her husband, Isaac, she doesn't say that's the concern at all, but what she brings up is the fact that, Esau, in his growing up years, he had married two women from the community, Hittite women they're described as, from a different culture and background, and she says to her husband, I hate all these Hittite women that are here, and if my son Jacob marries one of them, life won't even be worth living. And with all that drama, Isaac says, oh, okay. So he, for a different reason than his mother, has Jacob come in and sends him on up to Paddan Aram, to his uncle's, or his brother-in-law's community, far away, to find life and to find a wife in that community. So these are the situations. So even still, Rebecca is finding ways to kind of color the truth a little bit and make it seem different than what actually is going on here. Which brings us to Jacob's flight. And this is in Genesis chapter 28, starting in verse 10. He heads on up to the land of Aram, and on his way he overnights and has an interesting ordeal. This is in chapter 10 of Genesis 28. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a staircase resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So Jacob lays down on his trip, and while he is laying down and sleeping under the stars with a stone for his pillow, he has this spectacular dream, and there's a staircase with angels going up and down it, and there comes this reiteration of God's promise, the promise that he had made to Abraham, and a promise that he had made to Isaac, Jacob's father, and you too will be part of this promise, Jacob. And when Jacob wakes up, he is amazed at what he has heard and seen. And so in verse 16, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So Jacob's response to this dream is like, God was here. I had no idea. And so he describes it as the house of God. And so he names the place Bethel. Now, you may make the connection that our church here is called Bethel. Bethel is a word that means the house of God. And those who brought it, that name here, bring it with that sense that this is a place to be of God, a place to worship God and to honor him and glorify him. There's also a secondary meaning to Bethel, if you look it up in the dictionary, and it's a chapel for mariners. And part of the history of those who helped set up this place place was an organization called the Bethel Society. And through in England in the early 1800s, there were people who were setting up Bible studies on ships and then on land and going out throughout the world, setting up chapels. And they would call them Bethel, the house of God, which is why we are named that as well in this place. But in our story here, we have Bethel. We have this whole town is named Bethel. And Jacob certainly has this sense that God is in this place. But then a little curious thing at the end there. He's making a God a little bit of an arrangement here. All right, God, if God, you will be with me and will watch over me on this journey and take care of all the things. And then in verse 21, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord, or Yahweh will be my God. And this stone that I have set up will be a pillar, will be God's house, and I'll give you. So there's a little, if you do this for me, God, then I will follow you. You got to come up and perform here. So as I'm going to my uncle's place here, I need you to show up. Which sounds okay for what it was, but many of us wonder, can we do that? Can we tell you, God, if you do this, then I will follow you? On the other hand, I think a lot of us do that. That as we look at our lives, as the circumstances we're going through, we do kind of make these little side bets with God. Okay, God, I really need you to show up here. And if you do this, then boom, I will follow you with all that I have. One of the things we've seen about Jacob is he's looking for some kind of edge all along the way. We saw that in his first deal with his brother. His brother's famished with stew. He's like, yeah, I'll give you stew if you give me the birthright. It's like, that's a bit much. And then to go to his brother or to his father and pretend to be his brother to deceive him and receive the blessing. That he's got an angle that he's working here. And while he's got this view and this perspective of God and this scene, what's going to come of that? Is this really going to be a new trajectory in his life? Well, as the story goes on, he gets finally to Paddan Aram. And this is how it goes in chapter 29. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Now, when we were last going through the book of Genesis, it was last fall, and so we may have forgotten that just 3 or 4 chapters before this, there was another journey to this same place by Abraham's servant. And Abraham's servant was sent to this same place, to the same family, with the intention of bringing back a bride for Isaac. And so many of these tales are very similar here. Jacob is now coming to that same place, and where he meets Rebekah in that instance was at the well, and he's able to come to the family, and they're able to see and is able to bring Rebekah back here. But one of the things that we notice in that previous story is that Abraham's servant, all throughout this the journey that he made, was in an attitude and a disposition of, God, help me. Help me. He prays several times for success on this journey, for leading him to the right place and to the right time, and that God will be in this. And when it happens, he thanks the Lord for what he has done on his behalf. Well, in contrast, we don't see a lot of that going on here with Jacob. Again, maybe he's doing it, we don't know anything about it, but because our writer here, led by the Spirit, includes it with the servant and not with Jacob, there's something striking about that. Oh, so now they are here at the well. Verse 4 of chapter 29. Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they replied. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them, "Is he well?" Yes, he is, they said, "and here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." he's telling the shepherds there, why aren't you watering your sheep? Are you a little bit lazy? Verse 8 says, we can't, they replied, until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. Well, while he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. So the journey is now complete, and he's come to the family. He meets Rachel. Rachel goes to the house, and Laban comes like, oh, you're my sisters. Boy, this is so great, and kisses them, and this is just fantastic. And as the story goes on, it's like, okay, well, there's some good family dynamics here. They're excited to see him and bring him together, and that's great. Again, we notice nothing said from Jacob about thanking the Lord for success in this journey, but that's a side issue that, again, I think is going on in the character and the heart of Jacob along the way. But he's now with the family he needs to be, and he's in a safe place, a place that's going to help him out. Alas, that's what he thinks. After all, this is his sister's brother, and why would he not want the best thing for his sister and her son? Well, the story goes on. Then Laban said to him, you are my own flesh and blood. And after Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Rachel served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed. I want to make love to her. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? Laban replied, it is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his servant Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. So, well, there's a little bit going on here, isn't there? And not to least which, now he is married to 2 sisters, which, how could that go wrong, hey? I remember my senior pastor, when he was in college in New York, he was told it was a Bible college, Nyack Bible College, and he said, when you're here, this is in the early 60s, you just date different people, don't get too serious, don't get too attached. And so he's like, oh, okay. So he asked one girl out, and then he asked another girl out, but it happened to be this other girl's roommate. And then at some point he dated one of the other girl's sisters. And at some point, one of the guys came and was like, what are you doing? You do not realize all the problems you're creating in this dorm because they don't know what you're up to and what you're doing here. The dynamics of jealousy and competition and all that. Are they going to come to Leah and Rachel? Yeah, they are. But we see something else going on here too. Jacob, along with his mother, deceived the father and ripped off Esau in the process. And it seems like Rebekah's brother Laban is cut from the same stone, that both of them have this thing of deceiving and stretching truth in different ways. I don't know what went on with that family, but there's certainly this desire to this is what I need to get, and I will do whatever I need to do this. But now there they are. He's gone to get Rachel. He gets Leah instead, and all the dynamics. He demands justice for this. Okay, yeah, you can have her, but it's not our custom to do this, and so you can work another 7 years for this other wife. And that's Jacob's life for a while. Well, to this unions now, there will be family. And as I go through this, just the dynamics and the drama will continue to build. Again, Jacob loved Rachel much more than Leah. Verse 31, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. You see in Leah just blessings of children, but blessing mixed with tragedy, even exemplified by the names she gives these children. They're symbolizing, well, the Lord is doing something, but now maybe my husband will love me. What an aching thing to have. Well, the story goes on in chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Well, Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave to her Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" So she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The woman will call me happy." So she named him Asher. During wheat harvest, Reuben, that oldest son, went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" "Very well," Rachel said. "He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. This has really got the feel of a rated R or PG movie here, doesn't it? Just what is going on? Well, God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, "God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor, because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." We're going to stop there in terms of the text, and we'll pick it up next week. But I want to stop at this very strange and weird spot and say, we recite verses like 2 Timothy 3:16 that all Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the man and woman of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. It's like, yeah, but what is this about? What is going on here? This family is a mess. Are they a model for us? What are we supposed to get out of this? And I think what we get out of this is like, yeah, they are messed up. And the Bible doesn't gloss that over. It's like, yeah, there's some hinky things going on there. There's some dynamics that are going on in this family that are not healthy. We might even call them dysfunctional. There's horrible dynamics that are going on here. But when we think about family, we think, as Russell Moore said in that passage I read previously, that it should be good stuff and people that support each other and lift each other up. And yet, and I know that families aren't always that way. A lot of times families are not that way. My family, your family, there's petty jealousies, conflict, estrangement. I've talked at different points about some of the dynamics in my family with my older sister and some years ago my middle sister. We had some rough times and continue to go through some rough times. Estranged from the oldest one, the youngest of them, 7 years younger than me. Well, sometimes the three older of us have thought, she like had different parents. I mean, they were the same parents, but they're entirely different from us. And one of the things that happened was that there was a lot more attentiveness to her. She had a sense of confidence and standing within the family that I think a lot of us just felt a lot of trepidation for. I've told this story at other times about longing to hear my dad say, "I love you," something. And I remember getting a little note card when he mailed me a key that I'd forgotten at home. And his, "Here's your key, keep on keeping on, love Dad." And I was like, he said, "Love Dad, that's so fantastic." Because there's a lot of those dynamics that weren't there. And as I wrestled with that, I remember one of my advisors in college telling me, "Rick, you could make a change in the dynamics of the relationship. You could start doing some of the things that you'd like to see, like saying I love you or giving a hug when you say goodbye. You could introduce those into the relationship." And I'm like, I can do that? It's like, I could do that. I was not the brightest guy there. And so I did that. And it began to change that dynamic, so much so that my dad would initiate even saying, "Love you, son," and hugging when we said goodbye, and changing some of the dynamics between us. Seeing him grow and develop was one of the pleasures that we had over our last years, that he was able to be even more communicative and connected with us. That was a beautiful thing. God does a work sometimes, but he does a work out of messy situations. Your life has been messy. Your parents screwed you up in some ways, probably not in lots of ways, but all our families have issues. My wife's family almost seems perfect, but there's some big issues underneath the surface that are dealing with and have been for some time. There's rough things that are going on. You parents are probably screwing up your kids right now. Well, maybe not right now, but that's just part of this world. And one of the things that we all have to deal with is that we married sinners. Les and Leslie Parrott talk about this in their book, Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. Like, people who often just split and divorce forget they married a sinner. And it's easy for us to see that, but it's hard for us to remember that we're part of this issue. I mean, one of my wife's biggest problems is that she married a sinner. How foolish was she to marry someone who was as sinful as the husband she chose? What a mess. And then we made kids. And that's going to be a mess too. And our kids are decent kids for the most part, But we messed them up in certain ways. I was driving with Steph one time, and she said something like, "I've ruined you, haven't I?" Yeah, you have. But what do we do about that? We recognize we're all sinners. We are all messed up. And in living this life as messed up people, we recognize that, and we take the steps that turn us in a different direction, that takes into account the things that have happened and tries to bring some restoration or some reconciliation into those settings. I want to finish with this story here. Once upon a time, there was a little boy in a small town not too far from here who greeted his type A workaholic father as he returned home from work one day with a question, "Dad, how much do you make an hour?" Well, his dad was astonished and said, "Look, son, I don't even tell your mother how much I make. Don't bother me now. I just got home from work and I'm tired. Go watch TV." But his son didn't give up. "Dad, please just tell me. Please, it's important. How much do you make an hour?" To get rid of his son, his father just scowled and said, $20. Well, the son wasn't quite done with it. "Okay, Dad," he said, "could you loan me $10? What this? His dad blows up and yells at him, "Is this why you wanted to know, so you could figure out how much you could get out of me?" The rest of his tirade isn't worth repeating here, except to say that the little boy was sent to bed crying and without supper. Well, over dinner, his wife suggested, just a bit fearfully, that perhaps he had been a little too tough on their son. Maybe his son needed the money for school or to buy something. Well, her husband wasn't buying it, but his wife continued, and trying to convince them of their son's innocence, the dad began to feel a little guilty. And after dinner, he went and watched TV by himself for a while, but his wife's word bothered him still. His conscience wouldn't let him rest, and he finally decided to go to his son's room, give him the money, and find out why he needed it. So he went up and asked, "Are you asleep?" "No, Dad, why?" the son asked. "I thought about it some more. Here's the money you asked for earlier." And he threw the cash on his son's bed. "Thanks, Dad," his son said, eagerly taking the money. Then he reached under his pillow and took out some more money, mostly crumpled dollar bills and small change. He handed it to his father and said, "Now I have enough." "Enough for what?" he asked. "Now I have $20, he said to his father. He looked up at his dad with wide, hopeful eyes and asked, "Dad, can I buy an hour of your time?" His dad was stunned. You want to buy an hour of my time?" "Sure, Dad," with all hopeful look on his face. "All I want to do is have an hour to play together with you and laugh and talk, just you and me. And this way you won't lose any money because of me." His dad covered his eyes, excused himself quickly, got up and told his son he'd be right back. It took a short while for him to recover from what his son had told him. Then he went downstairs and told his wife what had happened, and she began to cry too. Together they decided what to do next. Dad went to his desk, took out their checkbook, and wrote out a check to his son. There was no amount. The date said any time, and it was signed simply Dad. Then he went back into his son's room, handed him the check, and explained what it was. "You don't have to pay me, son," Dad said. "I can see now I've gotten lost in myself and my work. I forgot what a father's real business is in life. But you reminded me. I'm giving you this special check. Whenever you need time for me and I tell you I'm too busy, just show me this check, and I'll promise I'll give you all the time you need." And living this life, we're all a mess like that dad who gets it wrong, who gets a little bit off. But we have a God who changes our hearts, who changes and helps to reorient us, to turn our hearts back and remember what's important here. Certainly knowing Him and walking with Him, but as we know and walk with Him, to recognize that in our families, whether we are the parents or a child, a sibling, that we have roles to play, and we've made mistakes along the way. But that doesn't mean we can't make a change now. This family we've been looking at, it's a mess. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. But is God in this? Yeah, because in this family, God uses to guide and lead an entire nation. And in fact, in this unloved wife, Leah, we find the wife who is both the progenitor of Moses and of the Levites and the priests, the one who served God. And we have her as the mother of Judah as well, from whom the King David and ultimately Jesus' line comes through. Through this unloved one comes this greatest gift to God's people, guidance and direction and a Savior. That's one messed up family. You got a messed up family. But God can work within the things that are going on, even in the struggles you're facing this day, as He works in you, as He does a work starting in your heart, in your life. Because that's where it all begins. Best thing I ever learned in Christian counseling was, what am I responsible for? I am responsible for how I treat others and how I treat myself. I am not responsible for how others treat others, how others treat themselves, or how others treat me. I can't control that. But what I can control is how I treat others and myself. Let's stand for closing prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the excitement of children even rushing back into this place, and the blessings that you've given us, and the challenges that you give us as well. And Lord, as we live this life, may we recognize the love you have for us, the work you have in us, and as messed up as we are, you've still chosen and called us that we may know you, we may deepen a relationship with you, but also that things in our lives may be restored. May we work and live out of that strength and that hope that you do a work that sometimes we can't, as you guide us and lead us by your Spirit. So Lord, may we be your men and women in our families, loving others, caring for them. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you this day.